Chapter 6. Hey Dad. Dondi piped up from the back seat of the Hummer. Would it be okay if Bobby John stayed the night? Going along with their school season schedule, Ronnie slowly guided the large vehicle along the icy roads as they left his mother's 59th birthday. Yes honey. Ronnie answered his daughter as he looked through the rear-view mirror. Just make sure that your homework is done first. Okay? Alright, thank you Dad. Looking back down, from the mirror, towards her lap, she clasped her fingers together as she thought about her grandma's birthday. Not just her birthday, but also how much it had appeared that her grandma Karina was only in her mid to late 20s. With that thought, Dondi then looked up, towards the front passenger seat, as she looked at the soft smooth appearance of her mom's 21-year-old looking face. Impossible to think that she's almost 34. Dammy thought to herself. Are you alright? Macaulay asked quietly as he peered at his sister. Simultaneously the 13-year-old grasped tighter onto the edge of his seat as the Hummer turned sharply, to the left, as they headed up Finley Lane. Yeah, Dondi said as she looked back at her brother, it's just strange sometimes when I think about how young Grandma Karina looks. How young Grandma Karina looks. Macaulay interrupted, remember that Grandma Sanchez is 120 years old. With this said, Macaulay watched his sister's face seem to go blank. As Thet then reached the top of Finley Lane, just as they were about to make another sharp left-hand turn, Macaulay looked forward, towards their parents, as they were completely oblivious of their conversation. That look on your face Macaulay, Ronnie said as he looked back into the mirror, looks like that you're up to no good back there. With the comment, Ronnie then also smiled at his son as well. Then, just as they rounded the corner, and began to pull into the drive, Malachi and Nicole's high beams flooded the view, within the mirror, as they had caught up with them. Immediately dashing for her cell phone, of which Dondi had left in her bedroom, while the family attended her grandmother's birthday, she quickly dialed Bobby John's number. Seconds later, after about 5 or 6 rings, Dondi heard Bobby John's voice on the other end. Hello. Hi, Bobby John. This is Dondi. I know it is. The nearly 13-year-old said, I've got caller ID you silly. Yeah. I know, I was wondering if you could spend the night tonight. My dad said. Yes. Bobby John interrupted, I know that my mom will allow me to stay. I'll check first though. Okay? Good, Dondi said as she left her room to head back upstairs. Would you like my parents to pick you up? Nah. I'll have my mom drop me off. She's about to go out, to the store, with my sister. Alright then. I'll see you soon. Then, just as she pressed the disconnect button, of the cell phone, Dondi had reached the top step of the staircase and walked into the kitchen. Hey Dad. Yeah hun? Ron said as he poured water into the coffee maker. Turning, to face his daughter, Ronnie had accidentally poured some water on the counter. Bobby, John will be dropped off by his mom, in just a little while. Thank you, Dondi continued as she wrapped her arms around her dad's waist. You're welcome, Ron said as he then set the glass globe of the coffee maker back on its heated pad. Just remember what I said about your homework. Now, with both hands free, Ronnie leaned over and hugged his daughter. It was just before sundown when Bobby John and his mother had pulled into the driveway. The sound of popping ice, from the weight of their car, had echoed through the house, causing Tommy, Macaulay, and Lucifer, from their room, to look out their window into the driveway. With the sudden sound, Angel also darted up the first flight of stairs just as Dondi put her hand on the door knob. He's here Dad. She announced just as she opened the door and saw Bobby John, wearing camouflage jeans, climbing out of their little car. With a backpack thrown over his shoulder, Bobby John walked in, through the door, and then immediately followed Dondi down to her room. Following close behind, Angel followed along but then stopped as they approached Dondi's bedroom door. Hey Angel. Dondi spoke up, you can come in too if you'd like. Cool. Thank you Dondi, Angel said as he walked in behind them. Dondi had an older version of the PlayStation that her father and uncle used to have as children. Often, Angel entertained himself with the older games either with Dondi or alone. Now, with another male companion in the house, he looked forward to the little challenge. Considering the cold weather that particular winter, Bobby John, himself, was quite surprised just how much fun that he had that night. Part of the entertainment involved a snowball fight with Macaulay, Angel, Don D, Lucifer, and Tommy. This continued up until a neighbor, living on the opposite side of the Bruce residence, hollered over the yards about the high volume of noise at 3 o'clock in the morning. Everyone had also played a game of Monopoly as well, and yes, Bobby John wasn't only just a challenge to Angel at some of the favorite PlayStation games, Bobby John had also whipped Angel at his favorite game. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning of January 22nd, of 2038. With only 2 hours left of Officer Kim Nay's shift, he chose to just sit in the patrol car, in the corner of the parking lot of the Come and Go, kitty corner from the Safeway, as he completed his paperwork early for his shift. Lowering his coffee cup down from his face after taking a sip, he then saw what looked like a child walking off of the Safeway parking lot, onto the sidewalk heading up Finley Lane, and smoking a cigarette. Seeing this kid with a cigarette instantly made Kim put down his paperwork and then pull out onto Interstate 40, turn left onto Finley and then pull up just behind the child before turning on his lights and then strobe lights, causing the kid to nearly jump, mid-air, as he turned to face the patrol car. Just as fast as the subject turned to face the bright lights, Kim had instantly jumped out of the car and was staring the Angel, Kim gasped. "I thought that you were a kid smoking, eh?" "Hey Angel." Kim interrupted himself. "What are you smoking?" Quickly the sweet smell of marijuana had filled the air between himself and Angel. Instantaneously Angel had dropped the remaining roach down onto the shoveled sidewalk. "Nothing much." Angel hesitated, "Just a little." "Angel. Come over here and put your hands on the hood of the car, buddy," Kim said as he watched the ground where Angel had dropped the joint. "Angel. I thought for sure, with your family and all, that I would never have to do this," Kim said as he leaned forward to pick Angel's roach off of the ground. Then, as he followed Angel to the front of the car, he reached over Angel's head as he set his clipboard, with Angel's joint on it, on the hood of the car. "Set your hands on the hood, Angel." "But Kim," Angel pleaded, "it's only a little. That little roach is all that I've got." As Angel stuttered out his plea, he simultaneously felt Kim's hands running down the back of his neck, back, and then his arms. Moments later, however, Angel felt Kim's fingers running down the side of his jeans, and then over the front of his pockets. "What's in your pocket, Angel?" Kim asked as he felt a lighter along with some other item balled up into the corner of his pocket. Without receiving an immediate answer, Kim searched the pocket for himself, pulling out a green-colored Bic lighter along with a plastic bag with something inside of it. "What's this?" Kim asked as he then hung the bag out in front of Angel's face. "Looks like a little more than just a roach." "Kim. Come on, man. Come on. Angel, you just lied to me." "I might have let this slide if you hadn't lied, Angel." Pausing as he leaned towards Angel's ear, "If you would have been honest, Angel, you'd be doing good right now. Now, how are you gonna feel when you have to have either Malachi, Ronnie, or Eddie come to the jail and bail you out?" Pausing again, as he stood back up. "Angel. Put your hands behind your head, buddy. I'm sorry, but I have to do this." Kim was honestly sorry. Yet, at the same time, Kim was one of those, if forced to do his job, he would. To the fullest extent of the law. "But Kim," Angel said as he slowly placed his hands behind his head. "What I'm about to do I won't be sorry for." At first Angel's words didn't really set into Kim's mind. Soon, however, just as he had raised the chrome-plated cuffs behind Angel's head, his words did suddenly set in just as Angel had forced his hands backwards, towards Kim's chest. Attempting to step back quickly, out of Angel's reach, Kim felt Angel's fingers slip into the top opening of his ballistic vest, grabbing a hold of it, pulling him up off of his feet. Angel stopped. Just as the words left his mouth, Kim found himself being pulled over Angel's head and then hitting the hood of the patrol car with a bone-crushing stop. "There. Now I've stopped, Kim. And like I said, I'm not sorry," Angel said as he let go of Kim's limp body. Then, as he stepped back from the patrol car, he watched Kim's body slide off of the hood of the Mercury Sable and down onto the ice-packed road. After Kim landed on the ground, Angel then stepped back up to the officer's side. Leaning over Kim's body, Angel then bent over and picked up his lighter and plastic bag that landed beside Kim.
With winds out of the north at 40 knots and gusts up to 60 knots. Temperatures are expected to be lows, of nearly 50 below and highs around zero. Now, with your local news. In the early hours this morning, Moffat County deputies were called to the scene of the death of a Craig officer killed in the line of duty.
Officer Kim Nay was a good man and a very good friend to everyone that got to know him.
Former officer, Karina DeClue said in front of her apartment in Ridgeview this morning. Officer Kim Nay's body is expected to be sent to his native home of Kotzebue, Alaska, for services, and then later buried in his birth home of Norvik, Alaska. Kim Nay is survived by his mother, Vernetta, and brothers, Noshruk, Joseph, and Tom. Tom Nay is currently a resident here in Colorado as he attends college in Denver. Kim Nay is preceded by his father, Kim Nay Sr., and his grandfather Joe Fields. He will be accompanied by his brother back to Alaska. Now, for other news.
Oh my God. Malachi thought out loud as he turned the radio back off. He had gotten up, with Ronnie, as Dondi walked out the door for school. As Ron walked his daughter to the front door and then headed down the hall to wake Macaulay up for homeschooling, Malachi quickly turned on the news as he was instantly stunned by the loss of one of Craig's finest. "What's wrong?" Ron asked as he returned to the kitchen and found his brother sitting down at the kitchen table. Kim Nay was found dead earlier this morning, Malachi said as he looked up to his brother. "Oh shit," Ron whispered, "you better tell Nicole. I wonder if Mom knows." Ron continued as he watched his brother stand up and then walk to the counter. "Yeah. She knows. CCMC just interviewed her out in front of her apartment." Opening the cupboard, above the coffee maker, Malachi pulled out 3 cups. "My son doesn't drink coffee, Malachi," Ron said quietly as he stood beside him. "No. But Nicole does. Better that she hears it from me rather than our mom," Malachi said as he then poured the freshly brewed coffee. It was about 4 months later, Malachi's birthday, when the search for the cause of Kim's death was chalked up as another cold case. Prior to that was Larry's death 15 years ago. Getting to be dangerous to work on Craig's police department. Malachi thought to himself. He had woken up early on the morning of his 40th birthday. Wasn't sure if it had to do with the big 40, or the fact that Dondi was headed out the door for her last day of school for the season. Either way, he had found himself looking deep into a mirror, with his toothbrush sticking out of his mouth, as he thought deeply about his love for his wife. He thought deeply about how lucky that he felt that Nicole no longer worked on the police department, or at least Craig's police department. "Hey honey," Nicole whispered as she walked through the bathroom door, "are you feeling alright?" Nicole was a little surprised that he had woken up that early. With it being the last day of school, the entire household was soon to return to their nocturnal lifestyle. When she heard the sound of her husband brushing his teeth, she decided to go check on him. As she walked into the bathroom, she found him, only wearing boxers, seemingly deep in thought. "Yeah," he responded as he made eye contact with her through the reflection in the mirror, I think that it. "Time for a change?" Nicole interrupted. Stepping up behind him, as she wrapped her arms around his waist, she lightly kissed the center of his back, between his shoulder blades. "Yeah," he responded with a quiet little chuckle, "a change." After rinsing out his toothbrush and setting it down, into a cup on the side of the sink, he then turned himself, within Nicole's arms, to face her. "I think that maybe it's time for us to have a place of our own." "Me too," Nicole answered as she leaned forward and kissed Malachi on the lips. Simultaneously she rolled herself up in his arms with him now behind herself, and, "I think that if we really try, that we could possibly be spending tonight within our own little home beside our parents. Let's do it." Over the next 20 minutes or so, Malachi and Nicole had walked out of their room just as Ronnie was about to walk back into his. Stopping, mid-step, Ronnie looked up towards his brother as the two approached him. "Hey guys," Ron said with a smile on his face, "it's back to our sleeping schedule now." Looking into his brother's face, as his own bedroom light reflected his blue eyes looking up to him, Malachi lightly placed his hand on Ronnie's shoulder. "Hey little bro. How about you come out to the kitchen with Nicole and I? We need to talk to ya." As they remained still, as they continued to stand in the hallway looking each other eye to eye, Malachi moved his hand, from Ron's shoulder, up to the side of his neck where he then slowly traced Ron's jawline with his thumb. Nothing bad. Just something that we've gotta do. With that said, Ron then followed Nicole and Malachi out to the table in the kitchen where the three of them sat down together. Must be real serious? Ron dared to say with any volume. It is, Ronnie, Malachi said as he then rested his head within his hands. Nicole and I have made a decision. And, as you know, we love you guys so much. Ron. You and I, as brothers, have never lived away from one another. But Nicole and I have decided that we would like to have a home of our own out to Ridgeview. Ronnie. This is a hard decision, but we. Malachi. Ron interrupted, it's okay. We're still brothers and you will always be my best friend. No matter where you live. No matter how far away. All that we have to do is remember to rely on our ESP, pick up the phone, and visit each other regularly. Maybe one day we'll start a family day. A day when we all gather to play games, watch movies. Harvest. Malachi. I think that this would be a good idea for you and Nicole. We can have a weekly family day. Hell, we'll invite Mom and Dad. Perhaps Grandma too. Tell you what. Rather than going to bed, how about I help you guys? That way Belinda and I can move right into your room. Thank you, Ron, Malachi said as he looked at his brother, you just made this much easier on me. We're brothers. We're supposed to do that, Ron said as he smiled back. With that said, Nicole, Malachi, and Ronnie all vigorously worked together, quietly as to not wake up anyone else in the home, of which all planned to sleep until sundown. As Ron and Malachi filled both Hummers with the contents of Malachi's and Nicole's bedroom, Nicole, herself made phone calls, to the apartments, to get an apartment set up for them and have the keys handed to them as soon as they would show up with the deposit and first month's rent. It was only about noon when the big move was complete. Now, as the master room of the house was completely empty, both Nicole and Malachi helped move Belinda and Ronnie into the master room. And then, Belinda spoke up shortly after she was woken up to the surprise moving party. Dondi can move into our old room. And Lucifer and Tommy can move downstairs into Dondi's old room. Malachi suggested as he felt that it would be better to have that younger children upstairs. Well, Nicole said after a moment of silence, I think that it's only fair that we wake Lucifer and Tom and let them know what's up. Really? We should have woke them up early this morning. But Dad. Lucifer pled, it won't be the same. Without even knowing that the move was already complete, the young adult attempted to protest the entire action. Lucifer. This is something that your mom and I need. You and Tommy can do this for us, buddy. Malachi argued. Besides that, now you and Tom will have your own room. Lucifer's. Your mom and I love you very much. And if we didn't think that you could do this, we wouldn't move. But we know that you can do this. You're a big boy now. You're a man, Lucifer. As Malachi finished his sentence, he reached out to hug his son. Standing behind him, Tommy rested his hands on Lucifer's shoulders. Tommy didn't take part in the protest because, as a bystander, he knew all too well that this house was well overpacked. After about 10 minutes, Lucifer relaxed as he too began to understand the importance of the extra space within the home. After his uncle explained his idea of a family day possibly once a week, plus constant visits in between and phone calls backed up with ESP, Lucifer and Tom soon turned their attention to the idea of having a bedroom to themselves. And then, Macaulay announced with a lot of excitement, I get to have a room all to my own. See. Lucifer's mom spoke up, it's gonna work out for everyone. And what makes everyone happy is what we need to do. You'll see it all work out, guys. To make the rest of that particular remaining day seem as normal as possible, Malachi and Nicole stuck around long enough to eat dinner with everyone and to make sure that Lucifer and Tom had gotten themselves moved downstairs, without a bed for that particular night, and that Dondi had gotten all moved upstairs into her parents' old room. We're in apartment number 38, guys, Malachi said right before heading out to their Hummer. Right beside Grandma and Grandpa DeClue's apartment. On December 1st of 2038, Just a little more than 6 months after Malachi and Nicole had moved out, both Lucifer and Tommy had decided that they would do a little Christmas shopping after dropping off a job application at the Craig Police Department. It was Tom that had gained interest in law enforcement. Watching the process of Kim Nay's death, at the beginning of that same year, had, for some reason, pushed Tommy's interest into actually gaining a place within the same department. Taking advantage of a well-overcasted day, returning the application and doing a little early Christmas shopping seemed to be the best way to add a little warmth into the chilly winter. As usual, Angel went with the boys as he enjoyed his outdoor adventures. Then, after a soft landing within the shadows beside Kmart, the 3 boys went into the well-lit and unusually crowded store. Unusual for 11 o'clock anyhow. Top on the list, within Lucifer's mind for Christmas, was Tommy. Of course, for Tommy, it was vice versa. With this, both of the younger boys had to separate from each other as Angel just checked on a whole list of his own. With this, both Tommy and Lucifer lost track of Angel as they also tried their best to lose track of each other. Lucifer was very particular of what he wanted for Tom. He had recalled that Tommy had mentioned a wish to go out camping. Tom had mentioned it more than once and so, over a period of time, had decided that it would be cool to buy a big tent, 5 to 10 man tent, that would be comfortable enough for both of them along an area for equipment, such as food coolers, fishing gear, and sleeping gear. He had also decided that he wanted to buy Tommy outdoor cooking gear as well. For both of them, he would get plenty of sleep gear. Tommy hadn't really recalled anything that Lucifer had verbally said about items that he would like. He did remember, however, that, through an ESP thought, Lucifer had hoped to find a perfect set of rings for the two of them. Though Colorado wasn't one of the few states, within the country, that allowed gay marriages, Tommy did feel that a set of rings, of which they would wear on their left ring fingers, would be an excellent symbolic way to show their love towards one another, in a semi-open way. Angel had something entirely different on his mind. Over the last 15 years or so, he had hoped very much for possibly getting a girlfriend. Through all of his efforts, however, he had failed completely. You see, even at the age of 30, having a body that looked more handsome than anyone else, didn't do an ounce of any good with the looks of a 10-year-old. To the girls, of the 30ish age group, the appearance of what couldn't be any more than 10 drew absolutely no sexual desire. Some of the girls within their mid-teens age group had shown interest in Angel. Problem was though, is that the feelings were not mutual. "Are you lost, sweetie?" an elderly woman asked as she leaned over Angel. The old lady was obviously an employee of the store as she wore the Kmart uniform. This little fact, however, didn't lighten the feelings that Angel was struggling very hard to keep bottled up. The feeling, or thought, that perhaps he should show the hag just what kind of sweetie he really was. "No ma'am," Angel replied as he simultaneously bit his tongue, "my parents are right down there." With this, he pointed down towards one of the more crowded aisles. "Okay honey. I just wanted to make sure that you were alright. Take care now." With the end of her sentence, she immediately turned and walked away. "Okay honey. You depends smelling medicated looking whore," Angel thought to himself as he stood, with his back to a shelf, and watched the women go up to a real child. After about a minute of watching the women harass the kid, Angel suddenly brought his attention to a mirror, that was right in front of himself, in the women's underwear area. Focusing on the reflection, of himself, he turned his head slightly to look at his well-trimmed haircut. The dark black fibers nearly reflected light, causing his dark skin complexion to glow. His face was smooth. Couldn't grow any facial hair, nor any other sort of adult hair for that matter. Completely naked, Angel still looked only 10 years old. Suddenly, just as Angel was about to continue his search, a woman's face appeared behind his reflection within the mirror. Rather than turning away from the mirror, to see the women, Angel just looked up as he tilted his head back. "Hi there cutie," the women said in a nice soft voice. "What's your name?" "Angel." Biting his bottom lip, careful not to pierce it with his canines, Angel carefully turned around to face the girl. To Angel, the women looked to be perhaps in her mid to late 20s. "So Angel, does everyone, like you, look that cute?" This was the first time, in Angel's life, that someone of proper age had even remotely flirted with him. Her question left him lost as his jaw seemed to hit the floor. No ma'am. Only me. With his response, the lady nearly knelt down, to one knee, as she put her nose and mouth close to the soft tissues of his neck as she simultaneously inhaled, taking in a deep breath of his pheromones. As she lightly snuggled her nose against his skin, she used her fingertip to softly rub the skin of his ear. With this, Angel could feel her wrap her fingers, of the hand that she used to touch his ear, around the back side of his neck. Then, without warning, she tilted his head forward as she planted her lips on his. Moments later, Angel felt the warm damp tissues of her tongue wedge itself between his lips and then press itself between his teeth. Closing his eyes, as to not be distracted by their surroundings, Angel then felt her other hand rub down his chest, over his abdomen, and then down into the front of his jeans. Instantly, as her fingers then found their way under his underwear, Angel swelled just as her hand lightly grasped onto his manhood. Then, after she lightly stroked the throbbing tissues a few times, she withdrew her hand and then pulled her face away from his. Well, Angel. You're pretty good at this. Maybe we'll have to do it again sometime. Immediately after she said this, she pulled a pen and a piece of paper out of her purse and then began to write. Seconds later, she handed the paper to Angel. You're welcome to call me at any time. Thank you. Pausing, as he looked at the writing, Debbie. I'll call you. Soon the lady turned and walked away after quickly rubbing him on the head. Nearing the end of the aisle, Debbie turned to walk towards the main entrance just a few aisles away. She turned towards the outdoors equipment. Hey Lucifer. She spoke. Here's your $20 back. This one will be on the house. He's kinda cute and I would like to give him another chance later. Okay Debbie. Thank you. No. Debbie interrupted. Thank you. As Debbie spoke to Lucifer, she then walked with him, as he pushed a cart, towards the layaway department. It was almost midnight when Lucifer, Tommy, and Angel all walked out of the store together. Tom and Lucifer spoke together and held hands as they decided, between the three of them, to just walk rather than flying. Angel didn't say anything. In fact, Tom had began to wonder if something might have been wrong with Angel as he was too quiet. Without questioning him, however, they just continued to walk towards Finley Lane. Feels like that it's warmed up a little. Tom commented as they neared the intersection of Finley Lane and Interstate 40. One thing that was obviously different about the weather is that it had stopped snowing. Very warm. Angel added. As Tom looked down to Angel, it had appeared that he was almost in some sort of a trance as his eyes and facial expressions seemed to be fixed into one place. Within just moments, Lucifer, Tommy, and Angel had began to head up Finley Lane. As they were about to pass Safeway, on their right, the three of them soon heard voices coming from behind them. Individually, the three of them had taken a look into the direction that the voices came from. There were two people, one of which was in perhaps his pre-teens while the other was in his mid to late teens. Regardless of the nearing company, Lucifer, Tommy, and Angel just pushed on further up the road. It was about 5 till 12 when the three of them were just about to turn into their driveway. Just as they were in front of the Bruce residence, Mr. and Mrs. Bruce's bedroom light suddenly turned off. With only the street light showing them their way, Tommy reached over, towards Lucifer, and held onto his waist as he simultaneously kissed Lucifer on the side of the neck. Look at those fags. The older of the two voices said right behind them. They're kissing each other. As the words came out of the guy's mouth, Lucifer and Tommy both rolled their eyes in response. Instantaneously Tom, Lucifer, and Angel all heard one of the two guys run up behind them. Before either of the three boys had enough time to turn around, Tommy was suddenly hit from behind, almost causing him to fall to the ice-covered cement pad, in front of their own home. Just a split second later, Lucifer jumped high into the air and then landed on the younger one of the two teens. The one that had hit Tom. As the kid suddenly turned over, onto his back to face Lucifer, he had also found himself being pulled, by the arm, into the driveway and towards the garage that was behind the house. Just as they reached the house, Tom had caught up with Lucifer and helped him to bring the kid into the garage. Let go of me. The kid yelled. You've just become dinner. Shut the fuck up, Lucifer said as he then also threw up the garage door. Within that same split second, the voice of the older teen could be heard screaming from high into the sky and quickly dissipating. Before the teen could say another word, Lucifer had him by the throat, up off of the ground, and carrying him to the big white freezer on the back wall of the garage. After dropping the teen, like a bag of potatoes on top of the freezer, Lucifer quickly took his hand, that he held around the kid's throat, and placed it over the teen's mouth, as he then opened his jaws wide and sunk his canines deep into the boy's throat, closing tightly on the kid's esophagus and larynx. With this, Tommy then stood, beside Lucifer, with his jaws wide open, and then buried his teeth deep into the boy's chest. Having problems getting a good flow of blood, Tommy quickly ripped the denim jeans off of the teen, and then sunk his canines deep into the muscle tissues of the higher inner leg area searching for the femoral artery. Simultaneously the kid fully flexed his legs as his body tensed up. "Who is this guy?" Scott asked as they all watched Lucifer and Tommy both violently harvest off of the small body. They had been watching Macaulay and Don D as they both played a board game with their parents. The sudden scream from the teen brought Scott's, Lloyd's, James, and Sterling's attention to the garage. As they entered the garage, the first thing that they had seen was Tom making a fumbled attempt to draw blood out of the kid's chest. "I don't know," Sterling answered. "I'm sure that he must have really done something screwed up though. Lucifer and Tommy are pissed. I think that there was two of them." Lloyd added, "I could faintly hear a scream, out in the distance, when we first walked into the garage. Also, Angel's not here." "Yeah. You're right, I heard the same thing," Sterling agreed. "You know guys," James commented, "that this kid here is gonna be living here with us." Just as the words left James' mouth, the four of them saw the kid's ghost sit up, on the ice box, and then jump down to the floor. Turning around, to face the freezer, the kid found his body to be laying down on its lid with two guys nursing from it. "What's going on?" the kid asked as he turned and looked towards Sterling, James, Lloyd, and Scott. "How about you tell us?" Sterling said as he walked up to the frightened kid. "What's your name?" "Jeremy." "I don't know what's happening." "Well, you did something to piss these guys off." Jeremy, standing beside Jeremy, in a way to block his view of his own body, he then continued, "What did you guys do to them?" "Nothing," Jeremy snapped. "Ah. I called this guy," pointing at Tom, "a fag. And then I hit him." "So," Lloyd interrupted, "you're telling us that you have absolutely no intelligence in that thick skull of yours, right?" With this, Lloyd walked up to Jeremy's and Sterling's side. "Sterling, I think that perhaps you should let him see his dead body. Let him see what his intelligence got him." Instantly, Sterling complied with Lloyd by moving out of the way. "See. Come here Jeremy," Lloyd said as he waved his hand for him. Just as Jeremy walked up to his side, he then also pushed Jeremy's face right up close to his own corpse. "See. You're dead Jeremy. How the hell could you treat an innocent human being like that?" "Because I saw them kissing each other." "And what business is that of yours?" Lloyd said loudly. "Were they trying to kiss you?" "No. If they did that, I would have." Suddenly Jeremy was slapped from behind. "You would have done what?" Sterling questioned as he then got into the boy's face. "Get out of here." Pointing towards the open garage door, Sterling continued, "The door is open. Get out of here Jeremy. Right now." As Sterling continued to get into the boy's face, Jeremy finally turned and then headed out of the garage door. Just as Jeremy crossed the line, between the garage's foundation and the cement slab of the driveway, his entire being immediately turned into one solid dark color of black. Like a silhouette that had also gotten the attention of Tom and Lucifer as they finished harvesting. This silhouette was in perfect shape of Jeremy's proportioned body size but only without any color. He was similar to a shadow of which he finally disappeared into shortly after he walked away from the garage. It was as if he had become one of the shadows. "Wow," James said, "that was almost like the movie Ghost." Four weeks later, with the events of December 1st still fresh in Lucifer's and Tommy's mind, Tommy had finally received a response from the Craigs Police Department. If you could come on down here, Tom, all that I need you to do is have you fill out tax papers. Then, tonight we'll have you start your first shift. Chief Chuck Kibbe said. I would be doubled up with another officer, wouldn't I? Tom asked as he fought to hold back his excitement. Well, yeah. Of course. You will be doubled up with Officer Keith Roeter. He's been in law enforcement for several years but only about 6 years with our department. You'll be doubled up for about a month or two before we let you out on your own. How about uniforms? Tom asked as he realized that he wasn't completely ready. We have like new uniforms here for you to choose from. We'll issue you a service weapon, badge, belt, cuffs, and so on and so forth. In fact, how about you come on down and we'll get that stuff all set up ahead of time. That way, you'll already be dressed out for your shift. Okay, Keith, Tommy said. I'll be down there in about 10 minutes. What all should I bring with me? How about your social security card, your driver's license, and your birth certificate? That way we can get all of the paperwork ahead of time. Okay. Yes, sir. I'll see you in just a couple minutes. Then, just as he hung up the phone, he looked up to Lucifer with a big grin on his face. I'm happy for you, Tommy, Lucifer said as he leaned forward and wrapped his arms around his neck. You did tell him that third shift is the only shift that you can work, didn't you? Well, yeah. Of course, Lucifer, Tom said as he stood up from the table. Hey, Ron. Yeah, buddy? Ron answered as he looked up from a newspaper. Can we use your Hummer? I've gotta go down to the police department to get my uniforms and fill out tax papers. Getting up from the table, Lucifer and Tommy both walked up to Ronnie's side. Yep. Do me a favor though while you're at it. Continuing, as he then looked up to Lucifer and Tommy as they overlooked him. When you're done, take the Hummer to the dealership, across from Country General, for an oil change. Then, as Ron paused, he pulled out his wallet and then handed Tom a $50 bill. It was just before 2 o'clock in the afternoon when Tom showed up to the police department. After a flight of stairs that descent into the basement level of the building from the parking lot, Tom was soon being welcomed with a handshake and being introduced to a few of the other staff members of the police department. After about a half hour at the police department, Tommy was then recognized as Officer Tom Russell. As Tom left the PD, he headed directly to the dealership as he said that he would. Moments later, he was back at home. Hey, Ronnie. Tom called as he reached the top of the stairs, I'm back. Then, as Tommy made his way out to the kitchen, he found Ron and Lucifer still sitting at the table with the newspaper spread out on the table. With his entry, Lucifer stood up and embraced Tom. So, how did it go? Lucifer asked as he simultaneously looked into Tom's arms at the stack of folded uniforms. On top of the stack was a set of brand new cuffs, within a holster, a set of keys, a couple ammunition clip holders, and a fairly new service weapon within a holster. It went well. While I was there, Chief Kibbe introduced me to a few staff members. I haven't met my partner yet. I'm supposed to meet him tonight. As the two continued to talk, Ron stood up from the table and took the items out of Tom's hands. How about you two go and get ready for dinner? I'll iron those uniforms for you later. Pausing as Ron picked up the equipment off of the clothes and handed them back to Tommy, make sure that you keep that gun and its ammunition locked up. We don't need any accidents around here. Though everyone supported Tom on his choice of employment, there was some moderate fear for his safety. This fear came from the loss of Larry Wallace and then Kim Nay. Even with the fact that Tommy was a vampire, and very unlikely that just anyone would be able to easily kill him, that fear was still very real. Once Tom had returned home, he could sense the happiness that he had gotten the job, but yet he could also sense the slight level of fear through the silence surrounding his job. Then, as Tommy was about to step out the door, in full uniform, after Officer Keith Roeter pulled into the driveway, Lucifer gave him a big hug and kiss. You be careful now, Tom. I will, Lucifer. I promise. Even with the words of assurance, Tom could still see that Lucifer's eyes had watered up a bit. Before heading down the few steps, in front of the house, leading to the driveway, Tom turned back to face Lucifer. I'll call and let you know that I'm alright. With this, Tom saw a slight smile grow across Lucifer's face. Seconds later, Tommy climbed into the passenger seat of the patrol car. "Hello, Tommy," a man said as he reached over to shake his hand. "I'm Keith Roeter. I'll be your partner tonight." With it being dark out and with the light off within the car, Keith's face was only visible by the dash lights and street lights from outside. "Nice to meet you," Tom responded as he shook the other officer's hand. "Quiet out tonight, I hope." "Not likely," Keith responded as he pulled the patrol car out of the Decluse driveway. "It's never quiet on New Year's Eve." With that answer, Keith watched Tom seem to bite his bottom lip. "City L2. Go ahead, L2. Be advised that F341 is on board." With each transmission, Keith raised the radio's microphone to his mouth. As he then pressed its button, a red light, on the radio itself, would turn on and then off again once he let go of the button. 10-4 L2. City clear at 23:56. With the dispatcher's response, Keith then looked back at Tom. "Well, Tom, to help train you on the basics first, I think that it would be best to concentrate on radio codes and the use of the radio in general." "Okay," Tom responded, "whatever you think would be best." "Well, you see, Tommy, our communication with dispatch means a lot to our safety. We need to radio and license plate numbers to cars that we pull over prior to getting out of the patrol car. We need to let dispatch be aware of a subject's physical identity prior to dealing with them outside of the patrol car." As Keith rambled on, Tom safely assumed that the most recent loss to the police department, Kim Nay, was the basis behind the communication between the officer and dispatch. It made perfect sense, to Tom, that Kim Nay obviously failed to communicate with the dispatcher prior to his death. All within the matter of just a few hours, Tom had memorized most of the alphabetical letters for license plates. With this he had also memorized most of the 10 codes regularly used by all of the emergency services. About the time that it took for Tommy to be trained enough to work solo, Lucifer had also decided that it was his turn to join the workforce. In doing so, however, he decided to follow in the footsteps of his late great-grandpa Declue by going to the Hayden power station. It was late at night, just after Tom had left for work, when Lucifer had made this decision. Sitting around the house, especially during the winter months when nobody is within their nocturnal period of life, and without Tom at home, Lucifer thought about the idea of working a third shift position. A couple of days later, after filling out and turning in a job application, Lucifer was called by the power plant and asked to come in for a job interview. The following night, February 7th of 2039, Lucifer began his first shift. "Your great-grandfather was a good worker," Lucifer's third shift supervisor commented. "It's too bad that he had disappeared as he did." Looking at his supervisor, he was also a good man and an excellent great-grandfather. Lucifer knew that his supervisor meant well. The fact that others had also missed his grandfather, however, overwhelmed the fact that others had also missed him. The man hadn't been seen in 14 years. Since Lucifer was the new guy, he was chosen to help prepare for the power plant to be re-insulated. A process that was done about once every 20 years by API Insulation out of St. Paul, Minnesota. API Insulation had originally done the insulation in 1998, making this the second time around. In doing his part of preparing the power plant for insulation, Lucifer had to climb onto scaffolding, so that he could reach the aluminum sides of the interior and exterior of the power plant, and snip off what looked like bolts. What they were, in reality, were rods that were welded to the steel inner skeleton of the structure. These rods held the large aluminum panels that were insulated on the inner side. Being that the power plant was just beginning to do this process, at the moment Lucifer was the only one doing this job. Due to the fact that it was still winter outside, Lucifer was allowed to begin this long process indoors. With Tommy and Lucifer both working their jobs, their daily routine changed dramatically. The main two things that they had going for them, however, was the fact that they both worked third shift and also the fact that they had each other. Oddly, or what Lucifer thought was odd, is that he had quickly gotten over the fact that his parents no longer lived under the same roof. "You guys moved out almost a year ago," Lucifer said as he stood up to move the shoe around the Monopoly board. Stopping on boardwalk, Lucifer then sat back down on the chair. "Seems like that you guys just moved." With the end of Lucifer's sentence, Malachi then held out his hand, to this son, palm up. Sounds like that you don't miss us that much. Moving his hand closer to Lucifer, he continued, that red thing there is a motel. You can hand me the rest of your money and deeds. It was both Lucifer's and Tommy's Friday from work. As planned, a year ago, it was nearly time for both Malachi and Nicole to head home after their family night. There were times that they would do their family day out to Ridgeview also, sometimes out to the city park, and then, once in a while either out sightseeing by road or, on an occasion, by flying. You guys have a good night, Nicole said as her and Malachi both stepped out the back door. Then, after Malachi hugged his wife, from behind, as they both faced their son, as he stood within the frame to the sliding glass door, they slowly levitated into the nighttime sky, and stay out of trouble. Nicole's voice could be heard as they were out of sight. The day had been long, yet it was a good day for everyone. It was Malachi's birthday, Dondi's last day of school for the season, of which meant, for everyone that it was time for their nocturnal season to begin. With it also being the night of their family day, everyone was very cheerful as Lucifer closed the sliding glass door and looked up to Tommy. Let's go down to our room for a while. Sitting right beside where Lucifer stood, Angel saw a smirk look on both of Lucifer's and Tom's faces as they kept their smile. With the fluctuation of Tommy's eyebrows, within his silent response, Angel looked up to Lucifer's face. You guys are about to get freaky. Ain't ya? With his question, a smile then grew over his own face as well. Just a little, Tom said as he held out his right hand with a measurement made with his fingers. With this response, Ronnie stood up as he then made similar facial expressions towards Belinda. Oh geez, Angel gasped as he then stood up and stepped towards the door. I'm gonna go out for a few hours. But Angel, Lucifer said as he rested an arm over Angel's shoulder, I thought that you would wanna join us downstairs. Or, join Belinda and I. Ron added as he looked down to Angel. In response to the double inquiry, in a mimicking tone of voice, in as much of a humorous way as possible, Angel continued. I'm not gay. Pointing at Lucifer and Tom, he then began to point at Ron and Belinda, and y'all's too old. With that, as he simultaneously threw his leather coat over his shoulder, he then walked out the door. Did anyone tell Angel that it's 90 degrees outside? Belinda asked just as the door shut. Without expecting an answer, Belinda then took her husband's hand and then led the way down the hall. Too bad Bobby John isn't here, Dondi said as she found herself, Macaulay and Eddie to be the last ones in the kitchen. Or Lovisa. Macaulay added. But I'm here. Eddie spoke up, and we've got plenty of games and movies, or we can go out on the town for a few hours. It was Angel's 32nd birthday, October 31st of 2040, when another big family outing was planned for. Ordinarily the family day would have been on Friday. Being that Angel's birthday landed on a Wednesday, however, they decided to combine the two periods of time together as one. The city park's wave pool. Macaulay suggested. With snow on the ground? Nicole questioned. How about the high school's pool or skiing in Steamboat Springs? She then suggested. Skiing sounds like fun. Angel piped up. Skiing it is then, Malachi said. Then, as Malachi saw the smile grow across Angel's face, he bent down to one knee and picked Angel up off of the kitchen floor. You might be 32 years old, Angel, but you'll always be our family's favorite little kid. It took a moment for Angel to process what Malachi had just said as he quickly thought about it. However, he had decided that it wasn't bad. Pushing his upper body away from Malachi's chest, he wrapped his legs around Malachi's waist as he looked him in the face. And this is the best family that anyone could ever ask for, Angel said as he then leaned forward again, resting his head on Malachi's shoulder. It wasn't often that Angel was held like a child. Even when he was one, of which probably led to the fact that he enjoyed being held when someone did today. All in about an hour's period of time the family was standing in line to pay for their season passes. This was routine around the time of Angel's birthday. The whole family enjoyed downhill skiing and did more than their share of it each and every year. Once everyone was paid for and fully suited, Angel led the way to the ski lifts. Only 6 people would fit onto one lift. Because of this everyone had to fit into 2 seats. Sometimes, because of Angel's body size, he could make a seventh person in one seat. Regardless of regulations. As they reached the top of the slope, everyone jumped off of the lift. Gathered side by side of one another, both Ronnie and Malachi led the pack down the steep beginning. Only at about 20 feet from the start, Angel had caught up with Malachi, then began to pass him. Then, just as he had gotten only a ski's distance ahead, Angel's goggles suddenly fogged up, causing him to not be able to see the trail ahead of him. Quickly Angel attempted to pull his goggles off of his own face when suddenly he felt a blow from behind, causing him to fall down to his side. Then, whomever it was that had hit him, landed on top of Angel, causing him to be instantly crushed into the hard-packed snow as he continued his downhill slide. "It's all right, Angel. It's me." Tom's voice spoke up. "I just lost my sight. My goggles fogged up," Tom continued to holler. "Mine too," Angel responded. Though Angel was happy to know that it was a member of the family that had landed on him, it didn't really change the fact that he was the one on the bottom of the rough, uncontrolled slide. Not to mention that he couldn't see. Seconds later, as they continued to head faster and faster down the slope, Angel felt Tom wrapping his arms around him. "Just hold on, Angel," Tommy said. Then, as Tom pulled real hard and twisted Angel up over his own body, they were both then able to see. "Now we know where we are." With this said, and with both of their goggles pulled down to their neck, Angel was now laying on Tommy's chest as they both faced forward. Holding on to Tommy, with one hand on each of his hips, Angel sat up and saw the rest of the family standing at the bottom looking up towards them. Moments later, just as they reached the bottom of the steep hill, they stopped right at everyone's feet. Just as they stopped, Ronnie knelt down beside them. "You two enjoy that ride? It looks like you enjoyed it." "Well," Angel said as he continued to sit on Tom, "you weren't the one to have someone 3 times your size fall on top of you." Though the incident did raise everyone's attention, including the ski patrols whom had come over to them on snowmobiles shortly after they got to their feet, everyone did enjoy the rest of the evening skiing the slopes. Then, just before midnight, everyone climbed back into their Hummers and headed back to Craig. It wasn't until about 5 o'clock in the morning that Angel had climbed into bed. Now, that Dondee was all done with her public schooling and Macaulay was done with his homeschooling, the nocturnal life was, once again, permanent to the household. Laying down, beside Eddie as he read a book, he laid on his back and then turned his head just enough for Eddie's side to block out the light out of his face. Periodically, between pages, Eddie would look over at Angel as he made sure that he wasn't preventing him from falling asleep. Just as the sun began to peer through the window, Eddie had decided that it was time for himself to go to bed as well. Just as he closed his book, he realized that Angel was in REM sleep. Carefully climbing out of the bed, so that he wouldn't accidentally crush or awake Angel, he then turned off the bedroom light, closed the bedroom curtain, and then climbed back into bed. Just as Eddie lightly laid a light blanket over himself and Angel, he then laid on his side, facing Angel, and then softly wrapped his right arm over him. As Eddie began to relax, he realized that Angel was having a dream. Opening up his eyes, Angel had quickly realized that he was within his grandfather's dungeon. Walking down the length of one of the many corridors, Angel thought for sure that he heard his grandfather's dog up ahead of himself. To Angel this meant that he was walking down just an old long corridor or he was walking away from what was a lake of blood. There were only 2 routes going towards the dog as its doghouse was placed within a corner of the dungeon. It had been at least a week or so that Angel had last seen his grandfather. He looked forward to meeting him and greatly anticipated a plan that the old man had mentioned to him. A plan that Miguel had said would really put him on the top of his favorite persons list. Angel had personally felt that he should have already been in that position, however, he was eager to prove himself worthy to the old man. As Angel continued to walk, he was soon able to hear the dog's chain rattling against its run line that was hung overhead about 7 feet off of the ground. Miguel had purposely run the line above one side of the corridor to the other, making it impossible to pass the dog without the dog intervening. If a person were to wake up on the section of walkway between the lake of blood and the dog, that person would be trapped. Once Miguel had a person within his grip, he would drag them through that lake of blood, or just a long corridor if they were on the opposite side of the lake, he would then drag them to a chopping block where he would then decapitate them with an axe. Sometimes, if he just didn't feel like cutting them up at that moment, he would chain them to the wall beside the chopping block. More often than not, his victims were able to break away from his grip. Angel himself was trying to either bring more would-be victims to his grandfather or just kill them himself. More than anything else though, he just wanted his grandfather to be proud of him. And to have his grandfather's powers. Soon Angel had come within an area that was better lit as the barking had also become very loud. Further up ahead Angel could see dust that was flung up into the air as he would also, coincidentally hear the chain drag down its metal line. The sight of the dust and the sound of the chain made Angel realize that he was in fact seeing the dog. Then, as Angel continued to walk, he could see the animal standing on its hind feet as it continued to pull and bark at him. Angel knew that the dog was well aware of his presence. Angel wasn't sure 100% if the dog would allow him to come right up to him or not. He knew that he could if his grandfather was present. He never tried on his own though. But as he finally got up to about arm's reach from the dog then stopped barking and then sat down. Reaching out slowly, Angel gently patted the top of the dog's nose. The animal then licked Angel's hands. This was all the evidence that Angel needed to know that he was welcome. With this evidence, Angel then stepped forward as he also kept his hand near the dog's face. He thought that this would show the dog that he didn't mean to be a problem or threat. Walking up slowly, towards the doghouse that was open, into the direction that Angel had also considered that he could have been walking from, he neared the small house, as the dog followed him. In the back of Angel's mind, the doghouse represented a goal as he wasn't even 100% sure of his own actions. If I make it to the doghouse, I've got the dog's confidence. Just moments later, Angel was able to reach out and touch the wooden structure. As he did, he found it to be sturdy on its cement foundation. Kneeling down, beside the door of the doghouse, Angel looked in to find many bones scattered around the floor. With a closer look Angel was able to identify a human skull. Along with this finding, the dog had come up to Angel's side and began to sniff in his ear. Miguel's dog was a large animal, a Rottweiler that weighed nearly 150 pounds. With saliva that found its way out of the sides of its mouth, it foamed in a way that made it appear to have shoelaces hanging from its muzzle. With an odor that could make a sewer rat run, Angel was quickly reminded of how nice it is to live within the warm and sanitary home of the Declus. After all, the Declus were his family. Yet, so was Miguel. I wonder where Grandpa Sanchez is? Angel thought to himself. With this thought he then stood up as he began to pat the dog on the top of the head as well. It was another failed struggle. All that Miguel got, in the end this time, was a piece of the person's t-shirt. A section about the size of the palm of Miguel's hand. Just as the victim broke free of Miguel's grip, Miguel then began to hear his dog barking far off into the distance. With this, Miguel shoved the torn section of clothing into his pocket as he decided to go check on the dog. Choosing the closest route, of which would take him through a waist-deep pool of blood, the old man turned and then stepped right into the thick fluid. Within 2 steps, Miguel was wading his way to the dog. As Angel continued to pet the dog, he noticed, by its ears, that he was hearing someone else in the distance. Periodically the dog would turn its head to look into the direction that Angel had come from. "You hear something, boy?" With his words, the dog immediately looked back to him. Even with eye-to-eye contact with the dog, its ears would turn towards the darkened corridor. Turning his back to the doghouse, Angel then placed his hands, from behind his back, on the edge as he pulled himself up onto the roof. Making himself comfortable, as he scooted himself back until the edge of the house was behind his knees, he then patted the top of his legs, with both hands, as he called to the animal. "Come on, boy." Once again, the dog looked away from the path beyond. "Come on. You can reach my lap." Once again, deterred from his objective within the darkness, Miguel's dog stood up on his hind feet as he placed his front feet upon Angel's lap. Why isn't he barking if he hears something down there? Angel wondered to himself. With the thought, the dog simultaneously, once again, looked back down the corridor as he kept its front paws on Angel's lap. Seconds later, Angel too heard something, from the dungeon, leading towards the dog's house. After about a half hour of observing Angel's sleep, Eddie soon took his head off of his hand, where he had rested it, as he also noticed a ray of light, from the sun, through a corner of the curtains pierce into the shaded room. With the intent, to go to sleep now, Eddie then carefully draped his arm over Angel's chest as he simultaneously held onto his arm. With this, Eddie felt that he would know if there were any problems involving any nightmares. Laying on his left side, just as with Angel, Eddie carefully rested his head on his pillow with his forehead against Angel's back between his shoulder blades. Like this, Eddie was able to monitor Angel's breathing. Reaching the end of the corridor, Miguel was surprised that his dog had not personally greeted him. Instead, the dog was standing on its rear legs with its front paws and head in Angel's lap. "Hello there, my grandson." Just as he spoke, Angel immediately looked up towards him. "How are you doing?" "I'm doing good, grandfather." Angel responded as he placed his hands on either side of his legs to lower himself to the ground, "Just wondering what it is that you had planned for me." "Well, Angel." Pausing as he approached his late daughter's son, "You've been doing good. Now, however, I want you to take care of someone within the immediate family." "Who?" Angel interrupted. Miguel was a tall man at right about 6'10" and about 210 pounds. To look at the two, as they stood beside one another, Angel didn't only look like a young child, as he did with everyone else, he looked like a dwarfed child as he nearly looked straight up to see the old man. "You'll know who when the time comes, Angel. And then, when that time does arrive, you'll be much closer to having as much power as I do. Yes, my dear grandchild. You too will have powers beyond that of everyone else. Much more than what you already have." Stepping up, beside his grandfather, Angel raised his hand as Miguel then held onto his grandson. Then, side by side, the two walked off, away from the dog, and into the darkness of the other corridor. At first, the dog followed the two up until the end of its chain. Then, after he could no longer hear Miguel or Angel, it then laid down, on the ground, and stared off into the darkness. It was about 10 o'clock that night when everyone was up for breakfast. Angel and Tommy were the last ones to make it out to the kitchen as they seemed to be dragging themselves through the kitchen. "Well, you two look like that you've been hit by a Mack truck," Ronnie commented as he looked up at the two. Ron had just sat down with a cup of coffee and was about to spread out the newspaper when the two older kids walked in. "I had another nightmare last night," Tommy responded as Ron had also noticed Lucifer nodding his head. "This time, however, Miguel ripped my t-shirt." "Look at this," Tom continued as he held out the polyester material within his hands. Standing up from the table, Ron reached out towards Tom and took a hold onto the shirt. What he saw was a section of the shirt, about the size of a large hand, missing from the bottom edge of the clothing. Indeed, it had been ripped, exposing Tommy's belly button. Without any comment about the rip, Ron then sat back down to his newspaper. "Do you have to work tonight?" Ron asked as his eyes searched for the article that he had been reading before Tommy entered the kitchen with Angel. Instantly, just as Tommy had mentioned the torn shirt, Angel had began to stare at the garment as he suddenly remembered his grandfather pulling a piece of white-colored fabric out of his pocket as they walked away from the dog. "Max." Angel suddenly spoke out loud, causing everyone to suddenly look his way. "Who's Max?" Eddie questioned as he came into the kitchen behind Angel and Tommy. "Oh. I don't know. The name was just on the tip of my tongue for some reason." Angel lied. In reality, ever since he had heard the dogs bark, as he had made his way towards Miguel's dog's house, the question, of what the dog's name was, had been on his mind. Too shy to ask his grandfather to remind him of the names he just put off. Now, suddenly he remembered.